Viking legends like the saga of King Olaf the Holy detail a special stone which had the power to find the sun. This amazing and mystical crystal may have acted as a wayfinder to enable explorers and adventurers of the past to navigate the world without the need for complex equipment. Greetings adventurers, my name is Kramer. I am back in my rangering gear to talk about some land and sea navigation. This is a Viking Sunstone. It is also referred to as Icelandic spar or clear calcite because mineral-wise that's exactly what it is. And it is hypothesized that this simple rock might have enabled a person to find the sun to allow them to get a navigational bearing so that they could continue on their journey. Now there are a couple different types of sunstone. Some of them can be orangish to reddish, and while those are very beautiful, they're not actually going to help you find the sun. So if you were interested in getting a rock like this, they're really not that hard to find. You would want a piece of clear calcite. They are available online for fairly cheap, and they're available in person even cheaper. If you go to something like a souvenir or gift shop or even like a new age store that sells minerals, you are likely to find a piece of clear calcite. That's where I got mine. It was about $5 at a local souvenir shop. And even the clear ones can be cloudy in the center. So if you are looking to find something that is going to be a good optic, make sure that it is as clear as possible. There are a lot of active theories as to how this rock may have been used in order to help with sea and land navigation. And I do want to point out that it's not actually conclusively proved that this is the Viking Sunstone that is referred to in Viking sagas of old. We call it Viking Sunstone today, and it does have what have been hypothesized as similar properties, but that doesn't mean that this truly is the rock that the Vikings used. That being said, it does originate, it can be found in Iceland, so Vikings that are coming from Iceland could have had access to it, and it has been found at various medieval dig sites and boat excavations, meaning that it was around. And there have been a lot of studies in the modern day by historians, by scientists, and by enthusiasts like us that show that you can actually use clear calcite, sunstone, Icelandic spar to find the sun on a particularly cloudy day, or even if it's gone just below the horizon. The basic way that this rock is supposed to work is that it actually acts as a prism. It refracts light. So you would put a black dot on the front, either with maybe pine pitch or charcoal, or a ye old Sharpie. And then when you look into the back end, you actually see a double spot, even though you only drew one. One of them is a refraction, the other one's the actual spot that you drew. And then when you use this rock to look across the sky or along the horizon, you can use that as data to help you pinpoint the location of the sun with relative accuracy. Now, in that horizon scanning method with using the rock, you would look through it and you would see the double points. And when you reach the spot along the horizon where you actually only see one of the dots rather than both because the refracted one has been blown out, that means that you are actually at the location right beneath the sun where it is going to set in the west eventually. Another method is where you scan the entire sky looking for the direct location of the sun rather than its trajectory. And the way that works is that there is an area around the sun, theoretically, that has more polarized light than the rest of it. So you would use this to look around the sky, and there's going to be an area where the main dot is darker than everywhere else, and that will be around the sun. Yet another method I've seen can either work looking straight through the rock or actually tilting it so you see one dot on this side of the rock and one dot on this side, and there's space in between. But the goal of this is to look around and find the spot where the two dots actually have the exact same opacity, and that will also tell you the direction of the sun. Now, I pretty much just started scratching the surface in my own research of how you would actually use a Viking Sunstone, and there are people that have done their own extensive research and have made videos about their findings. I have linked some of my favorites down below. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, is this a joke? Am I being pranked right now? How would you not know where the sun is in the sky? Literally just look up. And to my shame, I thought the exact same thing. Woe to me who has never needed to know the location of the sun during a blizzard or during an incredibly dark and stormy sky, and that was the only thing that was going to save me. Or when I cannot see the sun because the terrain obstructs it from my sight. This is not something that you're going to need to use all the time. It's a very niche and specific scenario where you actually cannot see the sun and you need to know where the sun is in order to gather the data to know where you are in relation to everything else on the planet. If you can see the sun, then you can just skip this step and go right to being able to tell the time or being able to tell your direction. But this is something where if you didn't know where the sun was, you really would need this tool in order to be able to navigate. That being said, this is quite in fact an antiquated piece of gear. Compasses now exist, they're very readily available. You're not very likely to find yourself in a position where you will really need to use this in order to survive. And this is a difficult tool to use. It takes a lot of practice and a lot of skill from what I've seen in order to be able to read the pretty raw data that you're getting and get an accurate reading from it. Because even if you're just a couple of degrees off, you're gonna end up a couple dozen to perhaps several hundred miles off course, depending on how far you're going. If you don't know how to read this properly, I don't know how to read this properly yet. So this is really a case of something that is a neat thing for your character to have if you were at a LARPer, especially if you're doing reenactment, and the culture you're reenacting did use these rather than a compass, then you should be using these. For most of us, this is probably a cool accessory to have. It's a cool piece of kit to have. It's a conversation starter. But if you were going to be entering a situation where you might actually need to survive, good backup, I will always be carrying a compass until I'm 100% confident I know how to use this. But even then, just bring a compass. It's better to have redundancies. But especially in a tabletop or a LARPing context where we're more fantasy, where we're more on the roleplay rather than having the actual real world skill in order to use this. It's very cool to have the real world skill to use this. I want to have the real world skill to use this. But in a fantasy setting, there are a lot of really unique story beats that can be had by using something like this. Let alone in the story, but in the real world, there are scenarios where a magnetic compass simply is not going to give you an accurate reading. You're near an iron deposit or something magnetic and the compass is being thrown off. This is a good backup. It's a good thing to have. There are also certain cultures when we're talking about a fantasy universe that are not going to have the technology to make a magnetic compass, or even if they could, object to using such modern gadgets and gizmos and would rather use something like this rock, perhaps even developing a sort of mystical ability very similar to the way that we look at the Sunstone of the Vikings today. And if you imagine that you are traveling with your party and all of a sudden a large blizzard comes out of nowhere, or you are enveloped in darkness by some sorcery or some other natural power, something is setting its will against you and you don't have a compass, or your compass doesn't work because that's part of the mechanic, you can use something like this. And imagine that you are now time gated and you have to get an accurate reading, because if you don't, you end up several dozen to a couple hundred miles off course. And it's freezing and you need to know where you're going, because if you don't get there soon enough, you're not going to be able to complete the encounter. This can lead to a whole lot of very interesting story scenarios. New encounters pop up just because you couldn't read the Sunstone correctly. And it also means that we have a completely natural and historical phenomenon here that has the potential to be a very unique and grounded magical item. What sort of other magical properties would this have in your D&D campaign, in a LARP, that it doesn't have in real life, but that would be believable for a Sunstone to have in a fantasy setting? And I think that's just such a great conversation starter, so let me know what you think in the comments below. I again want to remind you that a Viking Sunstone is a tool. It is also a hypothesis that these were used this way. It is not 100% proven. These are a tool that require training and research in order to use properly, and I would never just walk out into the middle of the desert or a forest or a tundra with only this unless I was really sure I knew how to use it. So don't take this as me recommending that this can just replace all of your modern navigation tools. That is not what I'm saying. I simply wanted to share it with you that I had learned that this thing exists, so that you can use it as you see fit for your stories, for your characters, for your games. So I will see you very soon, and in the meantime, I'd like to wish you good luck on your adventures.